how did you, like you mentioned the masters, like how did you end up with Take This? Just out of curiosity, was it like a personal passion? Was it like one of those things life kind of took you that direction?
Yeah, it's a funny story actually. So I've done my whole background is in nonprofit work. I got a master's degree in cultural studies because for a little while I thought maybe I'd go into academia, and I
Hmm.
realized like that is not for me, right? That is not
Right, right,
that really isolating. I like to work on practical things and with people, so
right.
that's not nonprofit work. So then I'd been doing grant writing and all kinds of fundraising stuff and nonprofit work. I was in an awful job. It was like the most toxic job I'd ever had. And I left and started doing consulting
Hmm.
and kind of needed to like recover from that experience. It was really awful. And um, in the meantime, my husband has been in the game industry for a long time. He runs a small game studio.
Awesome.
And
Indie gamers
yes,
are the heart of the industry, if you ask me.
they
So,
are,
so.
and he's made some awesome games, he and his team and his colleagues. So I had I'd been adjacent to that world for a long time through him, and um, then he put out to his network that I was looking for consulting, and the founder of Take This reached out, was like, "Hey, we could really use some help," and it turned out they could really use some help, and they needed somebody with nonprofit experience, like how to run an actual organization as opposed to just like deal with the cause. And so it kind of fell in my lap. And honestly, at the beginning, I didn't really know what the possibility was, and I wasn't that excited about it. And
Hmm.
um, I quickly that shifted for me to understand. I knew I cared about mental health because mental health, as because it's such a common issue, right?
Yeah, it
People
affects
have so
virtually
many.
everybody, right? Like
Right.
it's
It's
not
it's it's part of my family's life as well,
yeah.
in serious and kind of workday ways. And so um, it was something we realized that as a family we wanted to talk about more. I didn't hadn't thought about it being like the thing that I worked on.
Hmm.
And then as I got deeper into the work, I realized, oh, I can do something really interesting here. And so now I'm like so happy to be here and so in love with my job.
Yeah,
And
that's
here we
awesome.
are.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah,
Yeah.
see, I've like I've always so I'm up front. I'm mental health visibility, and I'm currently feeling out the sort of like boundaries of parasocial, like any pop psych term that ends up in our lexicon gets
Yeah.
misused constantly, and parasocial isn't good or bad. It can be used good and it can be used bad, but
Yeah, and it's a real phenomenon,
right.
parasocial
Right,
relationships. Yeah.
with the ubiquity of the internet age, digital media, people watching my show every day, and me being aware that like the audience will always know me better than I can ever possibly know them, and so a lot of my audience are peers that I go hang out with in tournaments and stuff too, and board game nights with a few folks too, and
Right.
but still, like as you get bigger, it's like wondering where that boundary is, especially when you have something like mental health visibility, because like I talk openly about the fact that recently diagnosed with bipolar 2. I've always known I was depressed, but I was in denial of the bipolar aspect because of my
Mhm.
relationship with my mother, and so like that hit me like a freight train at the end of last year. I was just like, no, I'm just depressed. I'm normal depressed. I'm not my mom depressed, and it was
Mm.
so it was yeah, I didn't have a great relationship with her, and so I've always talked about that stuff, and at some point I became aware I probably have ADHD, like check that box, like severe ADHD and CPTSD. So talking about that stuff, but avoiding trauma dumping, avoiding using my audience like therapy, like these are little things that I'm having to learn as I get deeper and deeper into this, and also, you know, you know, people like me, the peers and stuff like that, like we're strong voices of advocacy. So I'm aware that being open to an extent is kind of part of the name of the game. Um,
Mhm.
and so it's like, well, like normalizing bipolar in particular, like I've always known I was depressed. I've always been public about that for the first time since I started streaming, being mentally health visible, like being stuff like that. I with people in my orbit directly, I would say like I've like, oh yeah, I'm bipolar, or like they'd see me take my meds and go, oh, antidepressant, and like I'd watch them like bipolar. That's one of the real crazy ones, and I'm like, I know, because like on one hand I'm like I understand the like uh stigma. I get it,
Mhm.
because even my
Mhm.
mom, like I was her main, she was bipolar 1, and I have a lot of trauma from that upbringing prior
Yeah.
to being removed from that situation. And so like I'm like I can't even fault people, but to show people that like I'm a normal person, like I am
Mhm.
not
Mhm.
some some like character on a TV show that they use as like a a punchline or as a villain more often, right?
Which is why this is so, like,
Right.
why it's so important to normalize the conversation around mental health,
Right.
because there's such stigma and
Mm.
there's such really bad stereotypes around
Right.
portrayals and understanding what these things actually
Right.
look like and mean.
And I see chat gang showing up here already popping off. We got Ulfin chat, Lexalopoulos, who is a actually clinical psychologist as well. He's
Nice.
been on my show a few times. We usually do like little gags where we my first episode with him we mapped the chaos gods from Warhammer to like basic human emotions. Like, so which one is it? And that was just
Mhm.
a fun little gag. Domir's here, Kicker's here. I am of course the magical Mr. Mephisto, the most dangerous man in Age of Sigmar. I am joined tonight by the executive director of TakeThis.org, the nonprofit for mental health with a gaming focus, Eve Crevoshay. How are you doing this evening?
I'm doing very well, thank you.
Great, great.
Yeah, really glad to be here.
Yeah, no, this is awesome. I've been a little bit nervous all day today. I'm like, this is like a real podcast. This is just talking about like tiny, tiny toy soldiers, and then like accidentally dropping some dialectics on somebody. Like this is the real deal. So I have to be on my best behavior, and try not to rant too much on the show named
Well, you
RantCast.
can just pass it off to me. I'll rant for you.
Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
I do
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's great. So
Yeah.
it's funny because like talking about like destigmatization and stuff like that, like realizing that ADHD, for instance, was such a huge part of my life the whole time, um, and I called my show RantCast because I knew I have an ability to talk way too much. And so it was like taking the power away from other people making fun of me that my shows are too long or and it was this like internalized cope. Like how I just find it fascinating how now that I've been diagnosed with all these things, stuff I was aware of and things I wasn't,
Yeah.
reflecting back and going like, look at all these coping mechanisms and all these things that I've been doing anyway. It's been really wild. It's been this year in
Yeah.
particular has been a weird journey. So,
That it sounds like it. Yeah. I mean, I know a lot of folks actually that I work with, who are clinical psychologists, who are therapists, who like have identified all the ways that their life is, that their personality or things that they do are coping mechanisms, right?
mhm.
We all do that.
Right.
We all have coping mechanisms. And for a lot of people, playing games are and being part of game communities are coping mechanisms.
Mhm.
And sometimes and like it's important to know that, like, to say that coping mechanisms can be good and they can be bad. They can be
Right.
both, right?
Right.
Like sometimes coping mechanisms are really awesome and they're
Mhm.
necessary,
Right.
right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's why in particular in Warhammer, like I've been a part of several gaming communities virtually my whole
Hmm.
life. Tabletop RPGs I always say are like the highest rung on my nerd ladder. But I don't have a tabletop RPG podcast. I have a Warhammer podcast, and then sort of adjacent to that, it's usually been like video games. But a lot of my interests cycle through. But one of the things that the reason I ended up making a Warhammer podcast over other things is it's the community, and
Mm-hmm.
I kind of had all the other communities figured out that I've ever been a part of, figured out,
Hmm.
right? And this community, I'll just sit back and I'll be like, why is this community like this? And it's this curiosity, this fascination to this day. But like you said, that coping mechanism, what I think is great about Warhammer and video
Hmm.
games that have this a little bit, but with Warhammer especially, like when you're talking about mental health, you sit down and you make a thing, and then you paint the thing, and
Yeah.
you have a
Yeah.
thing. When I play video games, there are video games out there that have defined my life. like where I'm like, this is, I still make jokes that are referencing this video game, or
Yep.
stories I tell in my personal writing, are just constantly ripping off all my video game inspirations, shamelessly, unabashedly
Yeah.
stealing like an artist, as they say. Um, but like those games that do that are like a little fewer and far between, and
Mm.
it's
Mm-hmm.
it's really easy to do the like you said, the non-productive cope. It was really fascinating because my son, strong hereditary component for ADHD. My son basically got diagnosed, and they actually told us to let him play video games when he gets home. They're like, if
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
become his thing, you got,
Yeah.
like, obviously within reason, but if that's become his thing, let him do that because that's helping him decompress. And I'm like, I'm about to go like, yeah, but, and then I'm like, oh crap, I do the exact same thing.
Yeah, you do the exact same thing. Yeah.
Uh,
That's the sign of a good therapist who knows and
yeah,
understands how to support your kid. That's
right,
awesome.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
we can't like can't punish, like, so if he doesn't clean up the yard, we can't punish him by taking away video games anymore. We have to, and I know as someone who has ADHD, I pretty much only respond to external positive validation, right? Like
Yeah.
if you try to put the foot down, I go pure contrarian. Like I just, I guess what I'm saying is, checking. I crave validation, so like and subscribe. I need external positive
I mean,
validation.
validation is really like it's a big one. It's up
Yeah,
there in
yeah, yeah, yeah.
validation's important.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, it's been a lot of me so far. So let's talk a little bit about Take This. I had to finish that. My ADHD brain needed closure on the cold open like conversation. Like we have to finish talking about that.
Go for it. Go for it.
So you were, like, as I said at the sort of jump there, you are the executive director of Take This. Now I've got sort of two questions.
Mm-hmm.
What is Take This, and what's an executive director? So.
Okay. So I'll answer the what is Take This first, and then I'll describe what I do inside that and how that
Right.
fills the role of executive director. How's that? Um, so
Perfect.
Take This. The name comes from Zelda. Here, take this. It's dangerous to go alone.
Hmm.
So we're mental health and games, and that's pretty broad. And I have pushed the boundaries of that a lot. So we do research, we do advocacy, we do training and workshops, and we do content production, all for people who make and play games.
Hmm.
And that's primarily video games, but we talk to the tabletop community as well,
Right.
a lot, and we're really active in that community. So our concern is to do good research to support the mental health of people who play games in language that is familiar and comfortable, and also to act as advocates for games and the game community and the game industry, and to address the underlying conditions and environmental factors that can contribute to mental health distress and mental health well-being
Hmm.
um, across games in the game industry. So that's really broad. Like one of the things that we are really focused on right now is um, extremist behavior and other forms of online harassment and mis and
Like your hate raids or something like that, or something along,
yeah, and
yeah,
hate
something.
speech and hate raids, etc., and behavior
Yeah,
in online spaces that are in games or game adjacent.
yeah,
Like Discord is one of those spaces, right? For
yeah.
example.
Schrodinger's. We've all encountered, like, if you're a streamer, you play video games. We've all encountered, like, call him like Schrodinger's d-bag. Like
Yeah.
we've all met this person
Yeah.
that's just
Exactly.
pushing boundaries, sitting in communities, and how do we deal with? Yeah. So continue.
That.
Sorry.
Right. No, but it's good to hang your hat on that. And like, how do you design to address that? How do you do moderation to address that? How do you do trust and safety to address that? All the pieces, and how do you educate like the next generation of players and community members to do it, to think differently about that. And then we think a lot about the conditions inside the game industry. What is it like to work in games, and what are some of the pernicious problems that occur? And those have to do with gender-based harm and harassment. They have to do with crunch and the myth of passion and exploitation and other related factors. And then we do research. We do a lot of work with streamers and content creators around their own well-being, talking about parasocial relationships, streamer well-being, tools for talking about mental health. So we have a streaming ambassador program, and we also talk to folks about like how to talk about mental health in their streams and how to support their communities. And
Hmm.
then we talk generally about mental health and mental health resources, and we try to do that for as diverse a community as possible, and for as many people with different intersectional identities as possible.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so that's what we do.
Yeah. Yeah. That, I mean, so as many people in chat gang know here, everyone's got their sub club or whatever when they're Twitch streamers. It's not a sub club. You're chat gang if you wish to be chat gang. You don't have to subscribe to be chat gang. It's about intent. Um, so they all know that I've raised money for Mental Health America traditionally. So the last 2 years, I raised some money for Mental Health America. Like as soon as I sort of got my platform, as soon as my stream took off, I'm like, I need to put this back into the community. And so I did that for Mental Health America. And this year I was like, well, do I stick with Mental Health America? Do I do something else? And it was, again, mental health visibility streamers. I saw a Take This link pop up, like on one of those just like sort of, like mental health sort of checkpoint type posts, like, hey, if you need to talk to someone, like here's some resources type thing. Warm lines are phenomenal for that, by the way.
Yeah.
And I was like, holy crap, like take this. And I'm like, I clicked on it immediately. I'm like, wow, this is like Mental Health America does like a lot of really good work. They're a highly rated charity, but the focused on the game aspect plus the intersectionality that y'all do was like, I'm like, this is exactly like, I mean, I took one look at the resources page and I'm like, you've got both, veterans and BIPOC and LGBTQ and trans resources, like, and veterans and trans suicide rates are tend to be
Really
on
the
a higher
yeah.
side of the scales,
Yeah.
and so it's like to have something that is that holistic for mental health. I'm like, this is where I want to help out. It now I can make my nerd game jokes with the person I'm talking to and be like, well, is this person at MHA going to know about nerd stuff or not? Like you could just like, like.
I mean, that's one of the challenges that the mental health like professional community is pretty tech phobic and like just not like there's so many therapists who like they're like video games bad, and like that's not helpful to people who play games who need support, right?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
so we're trying to cultivate a community of therapists and practitioners who also understand games better,
Mm-hmm.
alongside so many other things that we do. Yeah, totally.
Well,
Yeah, we really try to bridge that gap.
well, the fact that like trying to find like a digital presence for one of the
Mhm.
larger mental health charities out there. I'm like, why don't you have a digital presence? Like everything is happening online now, and for better or worse, right? Like the transhumanism has begun. We are our phone might as well be plugged into our head. We're connected virtually all the time. It was kind of mind-boggling. I'm like, if you're not addressing the tech aspect of it, you've had a huge blind spot for people's mental health and the validation. I mean, the brain doesn't necessarily distinguish between how much dopamine I get from clicking on my mouse versus playing basketball. Now, sure, I could get more, but I put in such a low amount of effort for dopamine to like click my mouse. Like that's an easy constant source for my brain. Like this is, it's
Yeah, I was really encouraged seeing the Surgeon General just came out. The U.S. Surgeon General just came out with a report talking about digital health in teens and youth, and I was encouraged to see that come out because I feel like the the the, the conversation is shifting in effective ways around digital stuff. The thing is that games still there's a moral panic around games
always.
that's really pervasive, and it's sticky. Like it doesn't go away, even though it has been disproven over and over again. The
Mm-hmm.
link between games and addiction and the link between games and violence, like they don't exist. There's no validity to those measures, and so it's it's frustrating and it's hard. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Well, we've got a couple questions here from chat gang before
yeah,
you move on
yeah.
to executive director and the
Sure
two-part
thing.
question here. But Domir asks, how do you work with and or around MMORPGs, for instance? So
Mm. So the we don't there. Let me answer this in a few ways. So we don't directly like work inside like we're not showing up inside a game and playing alongside folks, right? Unless we do that for fun. What we do is we consult on which many of us do. I don't play MMOs, but that's okay.
I think
um,
MMOs have kind of waned personally, like culturally
well,
speaking.
I
I
mean
think
they
the window's moved
yeah,
on.
but they are important to a lot of people.
Right.
So anyway, so the we do a lot of work on like we do game reads and game consults. So we'll talk to folks inside the industry about like what's the content coming out, what does the gameplay look like, and is that okay, is that healthy
Hmm.
or appropriate or accurate. And then that's why we're doing all this work around online behavior and trying to help companies do better moderation, do better design, and think differently about what it takes to create safe spaces online.
Yeah.
And yeah, so those, I think those are the places that are most relevant to MMOs in terms of the what we do actively, and then we just speak to people about the experience of playing games and what
Yeah.
it means and how it impacts them.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it's actually kind of hilarious. Y'all do the AFK rooms at a couple
Yep.
convention spaces, and to
Yep.
me, like immediately I thought MMOs as well. I'm like, AFK, like the main tank's AFK again. Quick, heal, spam heals, spam heals. Like it's just like like my brain immediately jumped to that. Like, and then like my flights of fancy where I'm like imagining people at conventions in a real MMO IRL and like literally walking, in cosplay. I'm just like this mental hell. The mental image I got was so hilarious. Um,
That's fabulous, actually. Thank you for that.
so, you kind of, I mean, while we're kind of already sort of talking about it, the workspace in particular with video games, like face it, this changing of the guard, whether mental health professionals, the sort of older
Hmm.
guard want to address it or not, video games create a lot of jobs, right? Like
Hmm.
the jobs for like the landscape that my children my are going to be going into for jobs. It could be something with advocacy for video. It could, there will be a bunch of new jobs by the time
Yeah.
they're through secondary schooling and stuff like that. From what even I walked into, right, and some of the jobs that exist
Oh,
now will, you know,
it's a huge industry. The amount of money in the industry, the amount of money pouring into the industry, especially now that you're looking at Web3 and all of that stuff. I mean, the
mhm.
amount of money going into it right
Yeah,
now is
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah, yeah,
unprecedented. I
yeah.
whether or not whatever I feel about
I
Web3.
I hope, yeah, I don't, you don't have to say opinions your own. You're here professional, but I'm gonna dunk on Web3. No.
Oh, I'm happy to talk about it because I have a perspective and it's related a lot
Yeah,
to mental health, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
I think because it's like, oh, everybody's talking about metaverse and Web3 and NFTs, and I'm like, okay, one, this is a speculator market, right?
Uh,
Two, um, the tech the the tech is changing, but the assumptions behind the tech are not. And so the things that
yes.
challenge people in existing spaces
Right.
online are the same and sometimes
Well,
worse
I mean,
in Web3 and metaverse and VR spaces.
well, this is see, this is this show within the show. This is always about the the rabbit holes and stuff like that. That's the Rantcast way. So congratulations, we're doing an official Rantcast. I was watching. I was worried.
Don't be worried.
I was watching a couple of my watching a couple video essays, and one thing they brought up with like technology and advancement of technology is that like there is this sort of pernicious like undertone throughout like this sort of like like tech for the sake of tech community, where usually this notion that like, oh, we just invent new technology and it will fix issue, and then like that underlying issue never is addressed, and so there's just new technology that pulls with it all of the existing issues anyway. We especially see this in sort of supremacy power structures that just keep going through all of
So
these things.
yeah, so I was moderating a panel that was recorded this morning about LGBTQIA spaces and safety online, right?
Yeah.
And the folks who are all trust and safety professionals, so they do moderation and escalation and policy, all that kind of stuff. And they're talking. They're like, listen, if you create spaces using the same set of people and the same set of assumptions, you're not going to get a different outcome.
Right.
You're going to get the same damn outcome. Come on.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about. It's like if you don't think about the cultural assumptions and norms
Right.
and structures underneath what's happening, you're not going to get anything different. In fact, you're going to just continue to reify,
Mm-hmm.
reinforce these structures.
Mm-hmm.
And here is where my cultural studies master's degree comes in. I never thought I'd use it, and I do.
Brilliant. I feel like there's a whole other podcast now where we talk about like
Yeah.
intersectionality and these sort of cross sections, and I talk about how I'm a dirty anarchist and this is why you have to tear down all the systems because they're unjust, and then you're like, well, actually, here's this study, and I'm like, that would be a sweet joke, but we'll try to keep up on task here.
That would be fun.
um,
But yes, we are talking about mental health primarily.
right, yeah. So no, and one of these other things, like you mentioned crunch, and obviously, like with MMOs, I mean, you can't not think about the elephant in the room, which is like Blizzard Activision, which brought this ugly underbelly. Now, as I do have a background in games journalism, I was like, the minute the story broke, I'm like, didn't we already know like Bobby Kotick should be blacklisted forever? Like, I swear, 11 years ago, we were writing stories about this guy being like a huge monster.
Everybody knew,
Like
but nobody actually did anything about it. It took this shift. It took the riot lawsuit from the state of California. It took the action by the expose at Ubisoft. It took it took a yearly one thing
it took
after
Jim
another.
Stephanie Sterling public advocacy constantly like shouting down everyone all the
It
work they were
was
doing,
yeah, and
raising the
it was
zeitgeist on it, right?
exactly, and it took a long time, and a lot of people felt like, when is games going to get its Me Too moment? When is that going to happen? When
Yeah.
is that going to happen? And it took a long time, and there were people, and these are people I respect, people who are on my board. So many people would say, "Oh, yeah, I know him," and it wasn't just Bobby Kotick; it was others as well who were
Well,
like, "I know him,
Ubisoft
but
had a really pernicious individual
yeah,"
as
and they were
well.
like, "Oh, and he's an can I say it, an asshole? You know, he's an asshole, but
Yeah, there's a mature
he's
tag on
got
my stream.
yeah,
I'm
okay, okay,
pretty colorful. You're all right
great.
to swear. Yeah.
Um, like I know him, but he's an asshole, but he's important or he's powerful or I figured out how to work with him. And like that kind of like reinforcement of the status quo it's like really pervasive in the industry, and it's hard to move away from that because people are scared.
Right. Right. I mean,
Yeah,
I hope we're seeing a change. I think there's a surge in
we
like
are.
labor rights movements right now that's kind of percolating out into like
Mhm.
everything.
Mhm.
Like you mentioned the sort of myth of passion, which is like, oh, hey, come work. You're working in your passion, so you don't need to make as much money. Like wouldn't you do it for free? It's your passion, and
Won't you work, weekends for the next 2
yeah,
years?
yeah.
Yeah.
And that sort of like self exploitation that comes along with that, and that does has a meaningful hit to one's mental health. Like even
Yeah.
the healthy mind, I it's don't want to like use the wrong language here, but everyone gets burnt out. You don't need to have ADHD. You don't need to be neurodivergent like me and have bipolar, and like you don't need. You could just like people sprain their ankle. The difference is we can see the wrap on the ankle. People sprain their minds. They get
It's a
basic.
great image. Yeah,
Yeah,
it is true.
you
Yeah.
know it's and we don't have like a bandage wrapped around our forehead to be like, he sprained his
Right.
head. They sprained their head working too many weekends crunching towards the release time on video game XYZ. Um, it's it's a culture shift we need to advocate. There's a major culture shift that needs to happen in this. Video games are a multi-billion. They're the biggest entertainment dollar around. Um, you know,
Yeah, by far. By
like
far.
it's
I
not even
imagine.
close.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not even close. I mean, Hollywood is peasantly by comparison. The entire film industry. If you look at all of sports ball, including FIFA, including international sports and stuff like that, it's nothing compared to video games, quite
Yeah.
frankly.
Yeah.
I mean, this is this.
Especially post-pandemic, right? Like the pandemic was a major growth period for games.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that
Yeah.
was that. I think that was that sort of intersection in society that needed to happen, where labor in the games market and stuff like that. Way, like I really can just do this job from home, and
Yeah, that was a really important turning point to giving people a lot more flexibility. Yeah, for sure. And we were talking at the beginning about how I came into this work through my husband, as in the indie community, and you were like, indie game devs are awesome, right?
mhm,
That's where all the really cool stuff you see, cooperative structures like worker-owned game studios. You're seeing studios that are unionizing with the support of their leadership at founding. You're seeing all kinds of really interesting new structures
Mhm.
coming in to the industry, and like, really starting to remake. There are a lot of studios that are being founded by former AAA studio
Ho-
folks who are like, I want to redo this. I want to do this better, and I'm going to start this company. And there's like,
yeah, Hollow Knight jumps immediately to mind, where it was like
Mhm,
three like huge industry, and they're just like,
mhm,
let's just go
better
make
studio.
video games with a better studio. And
Yeah,
the mass exodus from Blizzard Activision that happened like
yeah,
6ish years ago already, where they just went and started their own. Like you're seeing these talented industry individuals who, quite frankly, are taking it to the grassroots, which is
yeah, yeah.
my
It's
jam.
really
Quite
exciting.
frankly, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It's where almost all of the interesting and exciting stuff is happening in the industry. That's not to say that there aren't AAA studios doing interesting stuff,
right.
um, and doing interesting things, not just with their games, but with their work environments too. But like for sure, yeah, there's really exciting innovation there. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that's great. Um, Yeah, like I said, like I mean, you're gonna see. I think we're gonna see, especially with a group like Take This, like helping educate, helping doing workshops with these game companies. You're gonna see that actually like grow from the base as new people enter the industry, as it becomes viable to go, work for like a little 6-person studio that
Mm.
you end up meeting through a couple Twitter contacts and hanging out in Discord and doing a couple
Right.
couple game jams on Reddit, and knowing your worth and knowing to take care of your mental health so that you have safe boundaries as you enter this industry that really isn't going anywhere, and doesn't have cause to change because they're making money hand over fist doing it the way it was done before. So we
Yeah.
need that, like, that again, that grassroots, that bottom up change, because
Yeah. Big time.
whether these
Big time.
individuals who run these big companies are assholes or not, morality doesn't really factor into anti-fiduciary laws and these gigantic billion-dollar machines that just turn and move and move. It
No, and changing the expectations of people coming into the industry, and like what they think they should do and what they could do, like that's really important. And
right.
I think talking to students in game design programs is one of the most important things I could do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. Awesome. Sorry.
Mm.
Just resetting my notes here real quick. So,
That's okay.
so as an executive director for Take This,
Yeah. Yeah.
you come and talk to like micro internet celebrities like me. Like, what does the executive director do of Take This?
Everything. So the joke in the nonprofit world is that every nonprofit person in their job description has other duties as assigned, and it's like everything or
Every
anything.
yeah yeah
And so yeah, I would say that the the my primary, so I have two roles. One is I have to run the organization. I have to make sure that people are taken care of, that jobs get done, that strategy is developed, etc.
hmm
And then I have to be the public face of the organization. And I'm not the only public face, to be clear. Like my team is very much public facing, and since many of them are clinicians, they're more qualified to speak on this stuff than I am. But I'm the one who, brings the leadership kind of cachet and says, "Hey, this is what we do and why we do it, and this is why it's important." And I'm the kind of networker and a connector
right.
across a lot of things. So I hold a lot of relationships and that. Um, and I work closely with our board of directors. Like my staff doesn't work with my board. So every nonprofit has a board, and that they have fiduciary responsibility for the organization,
Right.
but they also have uh, they have a vested interest in our strategic mission and orientation and execution. And so I am the interface where I ask them for the support that I need, and they provide hopefully some good advice and thoughtful
hmm
perspective.
hmm
I come to them with the thorny stuff, and then and I have a fantastic director of operations, Katrina, but I also like I'm the one who has to make sure that we're sailing in the right direction, that all the everybody's focused on the right set of things. And although, sometimes I lose focus and they call me out on that, and that's really good because you need a dynamic that works like that.
Right. Yeah. You need someone to say the emperor's got no clothes type thing, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
or to say like, Eve, that doesn't work. Like it's not working right now. Or no, you can't do that. We've got too much on our plate.
Yeah.
So that's that. I mean, we do a lot of partnering with other organizations, and I'm the one who initiates and kind of manages those partnerships and makes sure that we're talking to and about the right things, to the right people and about the right things. Yeah.
Right on. Right on. So just ambiently, I have a question sort of sprang to mind. Do you? This might be out here and off script here, but do you foresee like I know that like a lot of like my sort of like favored content creators are starting to like reach out to like organizations similar, though they're not the same, for like sensitivity readings of like if I've got an essay coming out, a video essay, there's some grassroots organization out there that will read it from a bunch of diverse perspectives to make sure I'm using the correct language, that I'm not being having any of my implicit biases I may not know or any of my blind spots filter into this work. Do you see a world where something like Take This does that with video games, where like video games get kind of passed through that filter?
Oh yeah, we do it already.
Yeah,
we do that already. Yeah, and including with some really big companies.
Yeah.
Which is wonderful. So yeah, it is increasingly people are starting to talk about it. I mean, what's wonderful is there's been a bunch of games that have come out in the last few years that around mental health themes that are really good. Right.
I'm gonna mispronounce it, but it's Grease.
Grease.
Grease
was amazing.
Yeah. My chat was busting my chops when I called it Grease or whatever. They're like, it's Gree Mephisto. I'm like, look, I failed French. All right. No, I didn't fail French. I only took it
they're
for 2 years.
Spanish.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I thought it was French. But no.
I think it's French, but they are from Spain.
That makes. I mean, yeah.
They're in. Sense. I think they're in Madrid. Anyway. Yeah. To further confuse the issue.
Yeah, just to like throw my look. I was an English lit major, not like a communications or language. I'm like I love language. Don't get me wrong, but like it all just gets jumbled up in my head as like like this is language, and I'm like So go on.
Blech.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's Gritty, there's Celeste, there's Hellblade, Senua's Sacrifice.
That was kind of a big. That was like kind of a big moment for video game,
yeah,
wasn't it?
That was a big deal. Yeah.
That was like, I feel like that was like the first where like, there was some indie projects and there was some stuff around there, but the and video games like that have helped their mental health or have dealt with trauma, like Silent Hill, for instance, was like a for me, I love the game, but to have a game that explicitly was coming out like, this game is about a mental health experience. This is what we're doing here. That I feel that was huge for the industry. Like that was like this is the moment.
And then Ninja Theory got acquired by Xbox, and they've got money and space now to do a couple of new things. So they're coming out with a sequel, which is really exciting. And then there's been like really super indie games like What the Remains of Edith Finch, and there's Celeste, and there's Sea of Solitude, which was just re-released.
I think it's on Steam sale right now.
And Night in the Woods. So there's all kinds of games that are they're really trying to do interesting stuff around mental health. And then there's games like, I have folks coming to me being like, and then there was Psychonauts too. We did a game read and help them develop their content warning.
Have you met Tim Schafer? Like, did your company get to?
I have.
Is he? Tell me. You can lie to me. You're allowed to lie to me.
Is he cool? To lie to it.
Is he as cool as I hope he is? Okay.
He is. He's really cool.
Oh,
he's
man.
as awesome as you think he is.
Good.
My colleague Dr. B got to interview him for a conference, and it was as fun as you expected it to be. It was great. He's fantastic.
One day. Like they say, never meet your heroes, and like when I was in game journalism, it was like a little bit of a different vibe for me from where I am now, where I get to be a fan again of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was, but yeah, sorry. That's I'm a little jelly of strangers.
that was a little bit of arrival for folks.
That's awesome.
But yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of really cool games out there, and there's also games that just have mental health content that we're looking at. Like we've been asked to look at like DLC or game updates for all kinds of really major titles that have like is the face portrayal or the options that we're providing this to people here, are they appropriate? Are the ways that we're using language okay in this like 5 sentence update, or dialogue? So there's some really cool, like people are starting to pay attention to it in really great ways.
Yeah. Yeah, like now in another couple years when they portray a character with bipolar disorder, I'm going to see a character that actually acts more like me than, these weird, like, crazy ex-girlfriend archetypes, right? That you always see portrayed.
Yeah, which are really harmful and bad.
Yeah. Horrible portrayals. Yeah, it's a mental health video game. Stories Untold. I do a Halloween spooky game marathon. Huge horror fan.
Nice.
I see. For me, horror and mental health are linked because fiction gives us a healthy space to process the unfamiliar, like in general.
Yes, absolutely.
Like that's why writing is awesome. That's why I love fiction. So, and sometimes when you give someone a nonfiction story, the truth is stranger than fiction. People go, this is bogus. Like you can't. If I give somebody an essay about mental health, they're going to look at it and go, I don't know about their methodology here, and they're crumple it up and throw it to the side. But if I tell you a story about a character, struggling with mental health, you might not even stop to think that you're getting that lesson. I wonder if there's some guy who has like a podcast where his whole thing is he tricks people into thinking they're listening about Warhammer, and then he's like talking about other stuff. I don't know. That'd be a cool show. Someone should start that.
Yeah,
what? But no, it's but with horror in specific, I think it hones in on trauma. It gives you a safe space.
Yeah.
There's some like the old Scream Queens era has some a lot of problematic stuff going on in it. But just as we become more familiar with mental health and stuff like that, I think we're seeing some very great like empathetic depictions of like trauma in horror. Halloween 2018, the sort of soft reset with Jamie Lee Curtis's character, where she's going through and everyone looks at her as her trauma that happened, and nobody sees the person. And like it was such a really good portrayal of somebody who's lived through a trauma. Like I see I project it. I see my own CPTSD in the character. So whatever. But then I'm like, when people know that you've gone through a big trauma, they look at you and all they see. And to watch her get to go through that, and then like literally, spoiler for a 4-year-old movie, like blow a house up, like in this like just utter like cathartic like moment of self-actualization and fun little flights of fancy that fiction is good for. So I do horror stuff, like his horror is like kind of, for me it's linked, and I do a horror marathon, and I played a game called Stories Untold on stream, which was kind of in the vein you're talking about. Indie studio. It starts out as a text-based RPG, like old school Mud style, where you're and like it starts to get weirder and weirder as you progress through these like anthology chapters, and there's a couple like really big reveals, and you essentially find yourself replaying through the like 4 little anthology pieces until you have this big reveal at the end that is like it's such a great horror game, where it's essentially this character processing a trauma that they've injected, and they've sort of
actually I think I watched my husband play part of that.
Yeah.
Really, I can't do horror. I like have
it's
like so I tend to often David will say to me, no, Eve, walk away. Nope, you don't want to watch that. And
yeah. It's I mean, it's hit or miss, like any genre, right? Like some people, but horror. Like I've got like a few folks in my audience. Hades, for instance, I see Hades lurking around chat gang. Hades hates horror and gutted out a couple horror games with me just because Hades likes me so much. And like, Hades, you're a champ. Thanks for hanging around. Like, just like, but like again, fiction broadly, I think gives us that safe space.
Absolutely.
And I think I think that translates into video games, because video games do something like, writer is my main thing. One day I wrote a video game for like a couple game jam type stuff. They never ever went anywhere, because most games don't. Like it's like any other hyper saturated competitive industry. Um, but like,
Cheers.
yes. So yeah, the wanting to like write a video game, but like I know my strength is writing. Um,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
the one thing, writing for me feels a lot more like a monologue that I'm like
Mhm.
delivering to like between artist and audience. Like this is
Mhm.
my and there is an interactivity to it. You're all art is interactive. You're thinking, you're gonna have your own spin on things. You're gonna
Mhm.
death of the author is a thing. You're gonna read the text. You're gonna infer your own life existence. But with video games, it's so much more a dialogue. You know,
Yeah.
you're very actively engaging the artist who created that medium, which is something I don't say I'm envious of because I very much like that I'm a writer and I'm good at a relatively decent writer. But when I see a great video game, I'm like, this is bringing something to the table I can like personally never bring to the table, like as just
Yeah.
a writer, you know. And I think that's I hesitate to say an evolution of art, but it is a very like pronounced and sort of new direction for art. Like this you put in a video game and that ability to suture in is the suspension of disbelief is automatic in video games. Like
Right, because you're in the environment.
yeah.
Yeah. It's it is really different. The interactivity and the agency that you have is really different. And that's actually really important. That's one of the benefits of games is that you have to develop mastery or understanding and be engaged.
Hmm.
And it's like a profoundly different experience than consuming media, passive media,
Hmm.
whether that is film, television,
Right.
or books or, other things, even social media. You have so much more agency, and
Hmm.
yeah, it's really powerful. And what's so interesting is there we talk my research director, um, Rachel Court, she talks about dark participation, and that can include like harassment and doxing and all the really awful stuff,
Hmm.
but it also includes like intentional uh, misuse of games for fun, like just trying to break games, trying to
So like speed
use
running.
game, yeah, speedrunning, but also trying to use them in unexpected and unintended ways,
Interesting.
even if it's totally harmless. It's just like that's fun. Let me see if I can do this just because maybe I can, you know?
So I'm sorry, is that that's considered dark participation too?
So it's not so dark participation is not a value judgment. Like when you say that, like some things are bad, some
Right,
things
it's like
are
parasocial
bad and
relationships,
harmful.
right? Like it's
Right. Some
parasocial
things.
isn't. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Right. So it's just a descriptor in this case because it's using a game in an unintended way. That doesn't mean that it's bad or
Uh-huh.
harmful to others. Sometimes it is, and if it is, then you're crossing a different line, right? But this is just a description of like, hey, I'm gonna break this thing because I can, because it seems like that would be fun.
See, I feel like I've been lapped. Like dark participation. This is the first time I've heard this term in
Well,
you know.
that's Rachel's term. So
It's a great term. This
it's
is
a really
amazing.
cool one. Yeah, that's why
Yeah,
I use it because it's really useful and
like
cool.
I think about like PT came out a while back with it was the game that was too good for this world with Kojima and
Mm-hmm.
Guillermo del Toro were gonna make Silent Hill, right? And they released this little like teaser thing where you're just sort of looping through one environment,
Yeah.
and you talk about dark participation. They anticipated that people would need to talk about how to progress on the
Yeah.
internet, and I always found that like an utterly fascinating and very like meta approach to video games where like we're starting to move the boundaries of even where a video game is outside of the video game with community
Oh
forums.
yeah, and I think actually that's like that is what that's what games really are at this point
Yeah,
is the game itself and the community around it.
yeah.
Like when you talk about a lot of people talk about how esports is just really toxic space and like
As someone who has been paid cash money in esport capacity, true
can
story.
confirm.
Can
Yeah,
confirm.
exactly.
I don't
Can
do it
confirm.
anymore for a reason. Like like
Right, right.
I'm
A lot
not
of
in that space for a reason. It
yeah.
was
And
killing my passion for things I loved. Like so.
right, right. and part of that is the way those games were designed and moderated early on, and how that's persisted in the culture. And part of that is that there's a community around it
Mm-hmm.
that feeds back into the game,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a really hard challenge. That like game companies and publishers and platforms are kind of late to the game on. They're like, oh right, that happened.
Well,
Fine. That ship sailed like 8 years ago, but now we're reaping the
not
results of
benefits, but results. Yeah,
that.
I mean,
Yeah.
this is right. This is exactly within the purview of what Take This is attempting to
Yeah.
accomplish. Is sort of addressing some of that stuff. Like
Yeah.
League of Legends, the chat just shouldn't be in that game. Like as a function, there should not be a chat function in that video game. But that wouldn't stop it, because that.
Right, because it has escalated and exists outside the bounds of the game at this point.
So you're just going to get spam pinged, any type of game mechanic that is there, someone is going to use to grief you, even if it's not chat, right? Like they're going to, if it's feeding, if it's doing whatever. I remember. Go ahead.
Yeah, and like there's folks at Riot doing really interesting stuff around player dynamics, but it's much easier to start from the beginning and do something better than it is to like try to build
Wrestle
something.
back this monster that's already unleashed, sort of thing.
Yeah, fixing any community is much harder than start like designing from the ground up.
Looking at you, 40K.
To your point about anarchy and
yeah,
but yeah,
it's about no rulership, chat gang. It's about no rulers, not no structures whatsoever. I just you came into a rolling. There's a lot of rolling jokes on the show, and I'm in it.
Great.
I am legitimately I am legitimately an anarchist, but the whole gag is that anarchy is misrepresented in like what it even means, and so like everyone thinks anarchy is like just Mad Max, and so I lean into the joke instead of like, well, it's about grassroots mutual aid networks, like yada yada yada, like all these things, and if you say you're a socialist, technically you're using all my principles. You're just not going far enough. It's just a gag.
That's a whole other conversation.
Yeah,
and one that
no, it's I'm a dirty leftist anarchist, and
I'm the daughter of Back to the Land. I'm the daughter of Back to the Land hippies.
Yeah.
I grew up in northern Vermont, and so yeah, that's a familiar conversation for me. But
no, it's funny because I started out like a like a just sort of like angsty goth punk, right? And who put anarchy symbols on his jackets because they looked cool.
Right.
And
thought,
and thought that it was like like if you've ever seen SLC Punk with Matthew Lillard, he says anarchy is lawlessness, it's chaos, and I'm like, yeah, lawlessness, chaos, and then like grow up, read a bunch of like sociology tomes, be like, oh, that's not anarchy at all. Like it's just like, but that's the dominant narrative, and so just being self-deprecating about it is how I cope.
I understand.
Yeah. So, but no, the wrestling the monster back. This community. Like, I think I've been trying to book a guest who did an episode on 40K and fascism, because their subtext is text. It's like textual, and we sort of live in it. My analysis of my view of the world. I think we live in a post-satire era. You cannot make satire overt enough that somebody won't miss it. That muddled my words there, minced my words there.
Right.
There's no length you can be overt with satire. No matter how ham-fisted, no matter how over the top you make your satire, no matter if you stare someone dead in the face and say this is satire,
someone will take it seriously.
Someone will take it in earnest. I mean, there are people out there who take American History X as like the alt-right think this is a great movie for them. Like, and it's like that you got the wrong message. And this is where I think those game companies need to be very explicit and just not court that crap to begin with.
That's a conversation we're actively having with folks. Because absolutely. And I think one of the most maddening things is when game companies, and Ubisoft is the most egregious of these recently, is designers will come out and say, "Oh, our games aren't political." Like, excuse me, that's a total bullshit. And also,
well, like Assassin's Creed's not political, huh? Like, the whole like having colonial soldiers fighting Native Americans, not.
All of these are choices.
Bold statement there. Yeah.
And so, I think that's kind of where we feel where Take This wants to be, is to be like, listen, there's a lot of subtext in all of these. Some of it isn't even directly mental health related, right?
Right.
But because of what those messages do to certain groups
Right.
and to their sense of belonging, their sense of personhood, and their sense
Right.
of safety,
Yeah.
that impacts mental health. And that's why I care about all of that stuff.
Right. Right. That
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
intersectional approach to it, right? Like
Hmm.
understanding that these, are all interconnected. If gender identity and ethnicity like are
Race.
inescapable for like certain individuals, right? That aren't
Yeah.
the default status quo. Like
Yep.
they're inescapable. Like
Yep.
and for somebody to say it's not political, like to somebody else's entire identity that they can't escape, it's bold choice, Ubisoft. Yeah.
Yep.
No, 40K I think is struggling with that right now. And I'm an Age of Sigmar content creator, so I'm kind of like on the peripherals of it. And we're right now, I think we're watching this sort of like culture clash between the 40K, uh, between the 40K's like very large. Like they are the when people think Warhammer, they think Warhammer 40K. They don't even think about Age of
Hmm.
Sigmar. They don't think about the fantasy property whatsoever.
Hmm.
The video games are all Warhammer 40,000. Like that.
Hmm.
That's. I mean, there's Total War is pretty good, but it's 40K, 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 and that community is huge. And they're looking over at AOS because we got the better game, quite frankly. And they're starting to come in here and kind of when you were talking about that community, it's like I'm not afraid. I think being afraid and being afraid of people joining your community is backwards. I think that is the exact kind of mentality that gets you in some of those positions with gatekeeping and toxicity and stuff like that. But it is something where I'm aware that I think we, as a community of AOS, because we did have this sort of I don't know how familiar you are with it, but Warhammer Fantasy Battle was the old game, and Games
Yeah. Okay.
Workshops hit the button and went boom, that game's over, and it basically like the whole community disappeared. Just like talking about like Riot
Yeah.
would be better making a brand new video game than trying to per se save like the League of Legends community. By the way, there are some great stuff going on in the League of Legends community. There's some great
Oh
people.
yeah.
Like
Oh yeah.
I mean, and what they did do for esports, like we didn't have a lexicon for esports. Like the fighting game community is like my favorite video game community because I like that sort of gamesmanship and like a little bit of
Yeah.
bravado, I like the wrestling kayfabe bravado crap. I'm a fan of that. That's why Mephisto is a character on your TV show right now. Like, but the FGC was not accessible. Like,
Yeah.
and so when Riot comes out here, the most fascinating thing they did was they taught people how to consume it as a sport. They were teaching their
Yeah.
audience
Yeah.
to consume that. So like I don't want to like keep harshing on Riot. I think
Oh
and
no, and I don't mean to, in the sense that I know they're doing really cool stuff also. It's
oh
just really
man,
hard to do. It's
Arcane
hard
was
to do.
amazing. That show
Yeah.
was like life of man. And, more of that, please. Like, their
Yeah.
world, their setting Runeterra is cool. I want to play
Yeah.
RPGs in that world. Like, it's. I know they did just release like a
That is the point, by the way.
yeah 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 yeah. But and so like to get that. I think that would be cool, and I think that
Yeah.
that opportunity for that exodus of the old toxicity of the community, and the new, like what happened with
Hmm.
Age of Sigmar. So Age of
Yeah.
Sigmar, Warhammer Fantasy Battle, boom, the button gets pressed, and you have this community that looks around and they go, "Our game is gone. We can either make a new community, or we can like go set our armies on fire on YouTube and get clicks." And some people did do that. And you know
Right. I'm
what?
sure they
Get
did.
get the clicks. I too require dopamine from validation. Again, like and subscribe so I can get validation right now. If you're watching on YouTube, make the number go up. But no, the uh, with AOS, we sort of like built this community from the grassroots ground up. It was one of acceptance, open. It was quite
Yeah.
frankly a little overcompensatory because they're like, no, come play our game. We swear it's good. And like there
Yeah.
was this like. I think they called them sunshine merchants in the early days of AOS. Is just a bunch of like, come play our game. It's great. And I think that all these things are interconnected. Video games and they cross pollinate and they Age of Sigmar is at an interesting point where they don't carry some of the weight from the 40K IP, but you have a new community that's about to sort of cross pollinate. And I think that it's important that we have an awareness of mental health, that we have an understanding of interpersonal relationships and community and grassroots and stuff like that as this happens, because quite frankly, the world needs to be more equitable, more open, like from my perspective. Like I think
Yeah,
that
I agree.
I think go ahead. Yeah, sorry.
I'm gonna interrupt a sec because my parenting and life is interfering. My husband is trying to go get my daughter and is late. So I'm just being transparent with why I might be a tiny bit
No,
distracted right
no. If you
this
need to, if you
moment.
need to take, I can fix it in post if you need to step away a minute.
I
Yeah.
think no, I can't like run out and go get her. So I think that I
My children gank me all the time. If you need to
I
step away,
know.
this is a
Okay,
live
hold on.
format.
If they call me, I'll let them know what's up. Okay, I think probably the most likely thing is that I will get a call from the school.
Hmm.
My daughter's in a school play, and in which case I will just turn this ringer on just in case, and then I'll let them know what's going
No,
on.
see, the live format of Twitch is what it is, like interacting with chat. This is why I love the live format for a podcast.
I
But
know.
then
I know.
I edit this down for what ends up on YouTube and what ends up on the.
That's great. That's fine. No, I understand. Hi, everyone. I mean, this is life, right? I
Yeah.
also, one of the things that I do as an executive director is I try to model, like, being a leader means modeling a lot of things and modeling being a whole person, like being a human being and also being vulnerable. And so
Mm-hmm.
I try to actually be really transparent about what's going on and when I might not be at my best because of X, Y, or Z.
Mm-hmm.
And like, that's part of it, right?
Well, I think that's part of mental health, right? Like he's mentioning, like
Yeah.
you when you're like I'm
Yeah.
like letting people, because no one knows what's going on inside, like what battles we're all fighting inside our heads, inside our daily lives. It's important
Yeah.
to, that's why I probably overshare too much. But my approach to content has always been like, okay, yeah, Mephisto, ha ha ha. This is like a gag I go into to like intro my show and joke sometimes. Very nice, very evil, wearing my Danhausen shirt. Um, but but I'm the person who pauses the video game and like just talks about everything and overshares constantly and I talk about my kids. I try not to. One of my fears when I was doing mental health visibility very early on was the perception of self exploitation. Is
Mm-hmm.
is this you have these two things, these barriers, and perhaps you can talk to this a little bit, or if you've encountered it with other streamers or some of the you're in your more professional capacity. But this notion of like, well, if I'm visible about my mental health, if I talk about, I don't go into specifics of the trauma. I'm like, there was trauma with my mom, like,
Mm-hmm.
right, like, and cool, like, I talk about I have bipolar. I the other day, because of therapy and I had a really bad hypomania phase, I was I can't shut my mouth. That's the ADHD. I was talking about the mania phase. I'm like, this is what happened. Like, I ended up in like a
Mm-hmm.
pure hypomania, like the, blah, blah. And like, and there's that fear when you decide to do that someone's going to think you're being self-exploitative. Like, I am commoditizing myself to, in my stories and my struggles to get likes and subscribes on the internets, or that if I say I'm having a bad mental health day on Twitter or something like that, so no stream today, that someone's going to be like, "Oh, quit whining." And having that
Yeah.
fear being a barrier in my early now it's just like I have a very sort of nonchalant, it's all like
Yeah.
my humor does a lot of heavy lifting for me in this stuff, and making it all into little jokes with myself, it goes a long way. But those early days, like I was, and every now and then I get a little like self-conscious. I'm like, well, I just shared this story about my hypomania. I'm like, is someone gonna be like, quit being a weirdo, or is somebody gonna come at me that I'm like, you know
Vulnerability, and it's also emotional labor that you put in, right? To let that stuff be visible.
mhm,
Um, but yeah, I mean, one of the things about streaming and the strange stuff about being having a parasocial relationships and being a content creator is that you need to be authentic to be seen as authentic, to be appreciated, to be respected, to really do make a difference in the way you're talking to your community. But if you're too authentic, then you're crossing a barrier that's not healthy for you or your community,
right,
right? Or
right,
your listeners. And so it's like constantly knowing what that boundary is.
yeah,
One of the ways I make light of my work is that I just tell people how important boundaries are all the time. Like I talk about boundaries and how use boundaries, use your boundaries.
Yeah.
And like that's that's really shorthand and not really helpful, but it's true.
Right.
You know.
And I think that's the like the big conversation in sort of our respective spheres, video games, Twitch streaming, mental health, a little bit ago was trauma dumping. Like this was the big conversation going on there, and I can't. One of the greatest things I do with this platform is advocacy for mental health. It's not just like when I'm being visible, I'm just essentially signaling to others like it's okay to be visible. Hopefully, like it's not necessarily like, hey, come on my stream and be visible, but like in your lives, take this out there. Like be a little bit more, have healthy boundaries for yourself. Like have healthy boundaries with others. But if you're feeling some kind of way, and people can't know what's in your head, you have to, you have to express that somehow. And the hope is that goes out there, but one of the best things is seeing it working. I just had a message today from somebody that was like, hey, I know you, like I don't really know you that well, and I just kind of started watching your content, but I'm not going to share their story, but like this has happened. And I'm like, well, first off, I am not a professional. I am just somebody who's had his own struggles with his mental health, for a very long time, and so anything I'm going to say is going to be like anecdotal to my experience specifically. But the first thing, here's what state are you in? Here's the warm line, or like what state are you in? Here's a warm line, like for that. These are great because it's not as heavy as if you're too like full on suicidal ideation or planning. Warm lines just give you somebody to talk to if you need to talk to somebody. They're run locally. They're usually peers, people who have mental health struggles themselves. They're fantastic for when you just need to talk to somebody. If you try to talk to somebody, even me, well-meaning as I am, I might be busy that day. I might miss the message. If you try to talk to your friend who knows what's going on with their mental bandwidth that day, like they want to care about you. Some people just don't know how to talk about mental health. They have no idea what to say, and
so let me plug some resources. So there is a specific games and online harassment hotline that is designed for people who play games. That's like game literate.
Mm-hmm.
So gameshotline.org, or you can text support to 23368. So that's a great resource. We have a mental health resources page that I think you mentioned earlier. Yeah. So takethis.org/resources.
Yep. Yeah,
we also have
in
FAQ. You got what?
In Cantabot, actually, it's the
Great.
takethis.org resources is in my timer.
Perfect.
So.
And also on our website, we also have a list of ways to talk about mental health, like how to talk, so kind of like basics about, because a lot of people don't know where to start. And then we just have, and you seem to have it down, and which is great. But for
it's a learning process. It's a learning process.
Totally.
Yeah,
and there's like so many layers to it, right?
And sometimes you don't know where the line is until you step over it, and then you have that like Operation Buzz noise happens. You're like, ah, crap, and you have to walk it back and figure it out. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
But there's also, we just produced the first of what's going to be a series of resources for streamers and content creators on mental health topics and how to run your channel. And the first one was on suicidality and suicide ideation. Mm-hmm. So it's on our YouTube channel.
Yep, I got that
right. So go check that out. Yeah, and so yeah, those are the free resources that are really important to get out there. And the Games Hotline is not ours, but it's a partner of ours.
Yeah.
So they're awesome.
Yeah. I've plugged the resources page before. It was so handy, and even with this individual who messaged me, I'm like, warm line if you just need to talk to somebody. This is going to be like your sort of first thing you should go into. The second thing I did was share your resource page, because it's just one of the most comprehensive. I don't know much about them. If they're a veteran, boom, there's a veteran. There was veteran resources. If they're in the LGBT community, like there's resources there. And like this is a perfect little hub. And then I basically, and this is something I tell everybody, this is from my experience, it's if it's an option, talk to your primary care physician and get a referral. I mean, it's just if you think you need to talk to somebody, if you're already to that point, it can be really hard. That's kind of like, and then and just kind of where I was going with all that was
Yeah. Sorry, my dog just got
no,
back from the
no,
vet all day.
no,
He's a little sick, and so he
doggo.
just ran in. There he
No,
is.
no, give the doggo love. This wouldn't be good mental health if you're not giving the dog validation and cuddles. Like we don't deserve animals.
Basilisk. Oh,
Oh,
they're
they're
such
amazing.
sweet things. Hi. Hi, Diddle. Hi.
Yeah. I jettisoned mine from the room. Usually my little the rescue is sitting over here. The corgi stays over there because she hates when I turn on the stream, and
Oh, lovely.
my Wimey doesn't care whatsoever. He just wants
Oh,
food.
of course.
So
Oh, this one wants out. I'm gonna let him out here
okay,
one sec, because
yeah.
my husband closed the door.
Yeah, yes, Meth stream. You can pet the dog. Chat Gang knows what's up. Yeah, so just checking real quick. I understand like that. As a mental health, streamer and stuff like that, I have some, it's been a learning process for me too, and I don't think I've mastered it. But I'm trying to do a better job of getting folks resources that need them, so that we can avoid the pitfalls of parasocial relationships and trauma dumps and stuff like that. So it's that towing that line between being my authentic self so that I don't get burnt out by pretending I'm somebody I'm not. And I learned with ADHD that pressure I often feel, where like I'm around people, I'm like, I don't want to be too much, I don't want to be too much, I don't want to be too much. So I'm like very quiet, I mind my P's and Q's, and then I suddenly, out of nowhere, it all comes out all at once.
Yeah.
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 And streaming, and I didn't even know it, was like kind of my ability to be too much
Yeah.
as I want to be, as I am, without that like other fear,
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
that's where therapy, where streaming really, like, our minds are fascinating things. They will try to self cope, and they will seek out these little patterns. And
Yeah.
luckily, I landed on healthier ones than less healthy ones, and some folks don't.
Yeah, I think that's great. Kudos to you. And congratulations.
Better lucky than good, anyway. Yeah,
Yeah, right.
no, and just the one thing I was gonna kind of spiraling towards there.
Yeah.
Was
Yeah.
I'm very proud that I've built a small community where people are like, hey, and I'm able to direct people to some resources,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
what Take This has, and I'm able to just go, check this out, that we're developing this because, it reminds me why I decided to do the thing, that the one day where I was just kind of bottoming out and I didn't know what was going on, and then I saw this person I admired who was a streamer say they had a bad mental health day. I'm like, you can do that, like, and I just like
Yeah.
it was just this
Yeah.
eureka moment, and I think that's a lot of mental health for a lot of people is it's
Yeah.
just is building a lexicon and an understanding as we kind of all sort of culturally grow and shift together to figure this stuff out. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's been wonderful to see a shift in the way people talk about mental health online. I really am positively encouraged.
Yeah, so I got that. We talked about consulting. Just going through my notes here. Chat Gang knows I don't take show notes. I'm just pretending. This is a blank sheet of paper in front of me. If it ever gets out that I actually take show notes, then I have to act like I'm a professional, and it ruins everything.
That's very
there's
disappointing.
expectations, like, gross. So yeah. You had a couple announcements as when you.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah. I think actually I said one of them already, which was that we have this new video out on suicide and how to talk about it and stream and how to think about it. So if other folks are our streamers, our content creators, there's a lot of resources there. We're really proud of that, and stay tuned for more. The next set of resources are going to be on burnout. There's going to be 3 videos on burnout, so that's really awesome. And then we have so there's those. I mentioned some of this work we're doing around online harassment and hate speech and stuff, and so we're doing some really interesting research. So that's not really like there's nothing to do but to keep an eye out for that.
I mean, it's so, like I said, we've just gone through this, like, I think the whole like internet community has just gone through like a sort of like cultural button reset moment, like our awareness. There have been some without being too specific, no, I'm just gonna say it. We went through 4 years of the Orange Man, and it utterly changed how we talk to each other on the internet, especially. From the it
Changed how we talk about it. Some of us are more aware of that than others.
I think it changed how and we're sort of like the folks who are aware are like looking back and they're like we need to like maybe figure this out and make something more equitable, make something
Yeah.
make safer spaces and stuff like this. This idea that like Twitter is a town square that I see thrown around sometimes. I'm like like is it though? Like and some of these other more pernicious ideas about how we interact and stuff like that. And as a dirty anarchist, I'm not one to like you want to make a bunch of rules for everybody or anything like that. But I do believe in a social contract, and we're having a moment where I think we get to sort of reevaluate that, and it's really good to have research and data to back that.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is.
You know,
For sure. Yeah. And and I'm a little bit more um interested in regulation than say you are, but I think there's a room for it. But there's
right,
also like there's a lot of people who don't know how to regulate this space. Like
right.
it's very hard to do it well, and so that's my concern. Um, but yeah, so that's one of our big announcements. The other thing is that inside the industry, we're doing really interesting work. We're partnering with Feminist Frequency, which is another nonprofit in games. Um, and Take This and Feminist Frequency are doing the Culture Shift project, which is the first time we're trying to do actually full scale, studio wide intervention around the issue of gender based harm. So, trying to tackle this thing, we talked about all of these revelations about sexual assault and harassment and abuse in the industry
Oh, this
and
is
how it's kind of
repugnant.
widespread.
Blizzard, like I won't stream a
Hmm.
Blizzard game to this day. Like
But here's
it's
the
just
thing.
so yeah.
Here's the thing is that it is ubiquitous across
Right.
games. I mean, it's ubiquitous across the industry, across like culture, society at large. But like in games, it's particularly bad. Blizzard and Ubisoft and Riot were a matter of degree. They were not like they're not outliers in any other way.
Right.
And in fact, there's other places that are probably just as bad. And so what we're trying to do is say, hey, if you're going to make these changes, you've got to make them at the leadership level.
Hmm.
And you've got to do it for everybody, and you've got to look not just at how you talk about it, but how you address it and what the systems and policies and procedures are in
Right.
place. And so that work is we're just beginning that. We're doing our first studio engagement right now, and that's really exciting.
So
And
you're
our
actually
probably big
engaging
work.
with a studio to sort of help sort of
Yeah, so
advocate for some of these changes and stuff.
we're
Yeah.
doing listening sessions, we're doing survivor response, we're doing training, and then we're going to do systems design work, like
That's
how do you respond to allegations, how do you address harm in a meaningful way, how do you
right.
practice accountability in meaningful ways,
Right.
how do you support people's experience of trauma.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, because I mean, there's gonna need to be systemic change. If there's not systemic
Yeah.
change, this problem is just going to like continue like across, just sort of
Yeah.
laterally, right? Like it's just gonna
Yeah.
and so no, I think that's really awesome. Um, and then the other thing I saw just kind of going on Twitter advertised around was that there was this Take This Identity in Gaming mental health panel where you're going to have a little 2 hour panels for very focused on some of those intersectional feature black Latin indigenous and just kind of going down, and that's
And
awesome.
I'm so excited about this. We've just hired somebody to work with us, Cassie Walker, who is Mental Woke on Twitter, and they're a fantastic advocate and practitioner. And that series is slated to start this summer. And we're actually we're have a call out for moderators who are all going to be therapists or clinicians of some sort, and uh, panel participants who share identity. So we're going to have like kind of groups that are shared identity. Because what we realized, one of my board members, Tanya DePass, who's Cipher of Tier, She's part of the tabletop community in a big way. Tanya, put out a call. She's like, I want to see mental health resources that are for people of color and people of marginalized identities and is by that community, right? Like enough of
Yes.
white people talking down.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, we're an all-white organization. We need to do something about that. And so this is part of my response to that. Yeah.
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 This is something I'm actually from a biracial family, and even though I'm at the cookout, my opinion on my brother Raphael's experience isn't the opinion someone should have. It is his.
Yeah.
And that's something I can build you a bridge to go see him, but or I can close that gap, but I can't. There are limits to in my case the dominant demographic of the status quo or whatever. There is a limit to the advocacy I can do meaningfully, because I'm always going to have some blind spots. I'm always going to have some implicit thing that was embedded in me, and I don't know it's there until I'm like, oh, hey, that was a microaggression, like, and those sort of things, like, where you're just and more so, representation freaking matters. Like here,
really matters. Yeah. Yeah.
Folks who want to come and talk to me and my experiences as a dad, like, cool, like, I'll tell you about being a dad. Like, maybe someone doesn't want to hear about my perspective on a mom. They'd probably rather talk to my partner. It's that stuff matters. And so I think, especially in mental health, especially where we're not seeing the parity of treatment.
Yeah. Well, and it's not just parity of treatment, like the history around racialized, especially racialized diagnoses and treatment and pathologizing of brown and black bodies and women's bodies and existence is pretty serious. And so we have to take that seriously, and we have to incorporate that into the way we talk about mental health, or else we're not really talking about the thing. And like, one of the things that's so interesting is that cognitive behavioral therapy, right, is really considered by many people, white people, like best practice for anxiety and depression, because it helps change your thinking and your perspective. But CBT, as it's practiced, and there's folks in my staff who will quibble with me about this. It's not as it was founded, but as it's practiced, it's really, really very much focused on the individual and not around the context in which you live, right? And for a lot of people, their mental health challenges or diagnoses come about in large part because of the systems in which they live, because the systems are messed up and the systems systemically oppress them, and so of course they're going to have negative outcomes. And so if you don't talk about that stuff when you're talking about mental well-being or mental health or mental illness, you're not really talking about the stuff.
Yeah. Alex, who was in my chat earlier, Lexolopoulos, as I said, he's a therapist. We were having a conversation on one of the shows I did a little while ago. I think it was actually off air. We were just talking about it, and how one of the things that he's aware of at his group that he works with is sort of like that. Even the mental health sort of like codification that we are currently using is through a Western, often white, often male, framework. And so even you're applying that framework on top of this other stuff, and so you're not getting the best analysis. Quite frankly, you're not getting the best view, I guess would be a better way of putting it, of mental health, right?
Yeah, there's a lot of limits to it.
So I think that's...
So that set of panels is set to launch this summer. I'm really excited about.
That's awesome.
Some of the most important work we've done. Sorry, I keep getting distracted because my dog wants something from me.
You're fine.
And I keep not getting up, so
it's
I'm gonna have to deal with it.
No.
I have a 14-year-old dog, and he needed IV fluids today. Poor thing.
Oh, yeah, my corgi, she's 14. Her back legs aren't moving so well anymore, but she's still healthy. She just had her checkup a month ago, and they're like, oh no, she's healthy. She's old, but she's healthy. Everything that could be right with her is right with her. She's gonna have some like arthritis, but like she's healthy. if you want, you can give her some painkillers. And I'm like, can you tell if she's in pain? Like, she seems all right. Like, but
Yeah.
I'm like, I
Yeah.
don't know. Painkillers on the ethics of painkillers yeah. Still here,
Uh,
Alex. Alex is still here. Right on. Yeah. Yeah. So
oh, good.
so you can confirm that. And then I was laughing earlier while you were on this sort of like heartfelt and meaningful point because Saturni Rose, she pointed out that I learned how to be a dad from Bandit Healer, which is Bluey is fantastic. Good shout, Saturni. I had Check Eggs got it. Let's see.
We all got to learn somehow, somewhere, whether or not.
Yeah. Alex says CBT is great at a lot of things, but it can definitely fall into the trap of applying a Western individualistic, cognitive-heavy approach that may not be appropriate for all clients or issues.
That's exactly true. Yeah.
So, yeah. I'm not a mental health professional. I'm just a person who talks too much.
Well, I'm not, and to be clear, like I'm not a mental health professional either. I just work with a lot of them,
right,
and have been engaged in these conversations with them for a long time. So I've learned quite a lot, but I have no degree and no certification and or licensure.
Right, but as you pointed out, like you have the master's in that sort of what was it, cultural.
Oh, now you're cultural studies. Now I'm getting growled at. Here,
Uh-oh.
we're gonna take. Hold on. I am going to take you on a walk.
All right. All right. That sounds fun.
I know. You still here?
Yeah. See, chat gang, you never know what you're going to get. This is the
I
best
know.
the best Warhammer show not about Warhammer on the internet.
I know. I know. Thank you all for your patience and welcome to a tour of my
house. Damn if they don't do a good job of researching the crap out of their tools to make sure they work, though. And now I got to have Alex back on here soon because like I want to talk about like talk more in depth about some of this stuff.
Yeah. Oh, it's so interesting. It's so interesting. And my crew, we have internal debates in our team and inside Slack and stuff all the time about this stuff, and it's really fun. Yeah, it's really cool.
Well, I mean, the eternal curiosity is my superpower. So it's just
totally is. Yeah.
So,
all right, I'm still here. I'm just feeding my dog.
Nope, you're cool.
So he stops growling at me.
I'm going to keep this term circle just so I can start using it, pilfering it off the internet, dark participation.
Oh, yes, very fun. Awesome. I will tell Rachel that you've started to use it.
Yeah. Yeah, utterly pilfering it from the, let's get this thing in the zeitgeist. This is amazing.
Yep.
When I retire from podcasting, I'm going to become a video essayist, and I will talk about this. That's
awesome.
I'm told that video essays is where you make the big bucks.
We'll find out.
It's a joke. I'm going to take this moment while you feed your dog just to kind of like shamelessly self-promote a little bit because the Rantathon 3, which is, of course, I will be raising money for Take This this year. This is my third year doing the Rantathon. So Rantathon 3, a link to the rants. The Zelda reference is a double entendre because Take This also is a Zelda reference. So that was on purpose. That was on purpose, everyone. You're welcome for my terrible sense of humor. But if anyone happens to be in chat, gang, or anyone's like watching this at a later date on YouTube or catching it on any of the podcast apps, Rantathon is July 30th and July 31st. We will be raising a bunch of money for Take This to help with some of this advocacy, to help with a lot of this. For me. It felt a little bit like destiny when I stumbled upon Take This and made the decision to sort of shift away from MHA, the gamer vibes. It was like almost immediate validation. I sent an email to you. I'm like, wow, like this is, I've been, I'm like, wow, okay, like this is, like there's a harmony to this, and like this makes a lot of sense. And Dr. B will actually be on, I believe it is 2 p.m. on July 30th for one of the guest blocks, giving away an entire Crix army. It is not a raffle. This is just an appreciation of anyone who donates. minimum $5. Everyone's entered. You get one entry. It doesn't matter how much or how little you donate, because every little bit matters. And someone could win a whole Crix army. We've got all kinds of stuff. We were just crunching the numbers today. Something like $7,000 worth of prize support from.
That's amazing. I'm so
from
excited for this.
well, there's that part of my brain where I'm like, we got like $7,000 in prizes. Why don't we just like pawn it all and donate that? Like, and then I don't have to work as hard. like, like, just eBay it all. Let's go. But no, it's. I think the other part of this is it is the visibility, it is the advocacy, it is spreading the word. So even if you can't donate something, watch. You know, you might learn something that you can use in your life, or I mean, you're not gonna learn anything. We're really just gonna like banter just 30 straight hours.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun.
But it will be fun banter
It's
for
gonna
30
be
straight
fun.
hours. Yeah, and then we'll
Yeah.
sometimes point at like mental health. We'll be like, mental health, take this, and then you'll have it in your mind that like these things are important, and then that will be some pretty good advocacy. That'll build things into the zeitgeist. And like I said, times are tough. People, out there trying to survive. Your mental bandwidth is where it is. So signal boost. Tell people that we're trying to raise some money for mental health.
And listen, half the battle with mental health is just creating a space like where it's okay to talk about it, and like telling people that this is a normal thing to have a conversation about, because it's so much of what happens with mental health is people are just afraid. The stigma is so strong, and it's getting better. It's getting a lot better, but it still exists, and people have a really hard time talking about it. So the more we just say it's worth talking about.
Yeah. And when you see folks show up and they're like, "There's $7,000 worth of stuff," like clearly people care about mental health. Like this is I talking about falling into things. I did the first Rantathon as a joke. Someone said my shows were too long, and I said I'll show them, and I spited them by doing a 27-hour charity stream. Like, I'm like, well, if I'm gonna make the longest podcast ever, it might as well be for charity. And I stayed up all 27 hours. As a streamer, a 24-hour stream is kind of a rite of passage. I'd done a few for my birthday. It was usually my birthday tradition. And I'm like, instead of my birthday 24-hour stream this year, I'll do a charity one instead. And like, it wasn't. And that's it, but it was out of spite. But the thing is like I had one box of minis to give away. That was for my personal coffers. I'm like, I got one box of minis to go away. I'll raise about $700 for mental health. Like, it'll be great. And then people were like, hey, can I donate a prize? Can I donate something to you? And I'm like, sure. And next thing I knew, we'd raised $7,000. Like it was a whirlwind. And then the next year we did better. And this year I want to do even better still. Now, it is a joke to not tell you my real goal. I've said it on the Tiltify page, which should go live tonight or tomorrow, and I'll email that to you too. So if there's some folks in your organization that need that, you'll have that, and you can see all the stuff we're giving away. It's not just Warhammer stuff. There's board games in there. Like Atlas Games is donating a Plain Gia is their new thing that they're coming out with, a D&D 5th ed setting thing. They're donating a deluxe. They're donating a deluxe box of that, or a deluxe version of that that launches this fall. We've got board games. I think there's some dice. There's custom T-shirts, all kinds of stuff.
Nice.
So it's a lot of stuff. I'll have that Tiltify page up. And the joke is we're trying to 10,000. Like. And then we'll do like the slow reveal of like all the wacky incentives afterwards, because that's I have a bad sense of humor,
really
and it's gotten me here, right? But really Ulf is here, and Ulf will tell you what we're trying to raise is 15,404, 404 not found, because then he's going to drive up to my neck of the woods and fight me for real in full armor. On camera for everyone's amusement.
Now that sounds like fun.
Yeah, so he's in SCA battles, like, which is the like the one of the big So he will fight me for real in armor if we raise a bunch of money this year, everybody. So
I have a vested interest, both because I want the money for the organization because we can use it,
right,
and also because that sounds amazing and I want to see that.
Oh, he's like he is the mountain that games, or the mountain that paints, that fully painted Crix army, the fully painted Stormcast army, and there's a fully painted Necrons army. So those three armies, That's Ulf. So he did it
Wow.
just because he wants to beat me up for real IRL, and for all of you all to see it. So and I'm for it. Like apparently I'll be in armor. I might have a katana, which I think is pretty sweet. Like I
Is
don't know.
he gonna get armor for
Yeah,
you?
yeah, he's gonna get. He's got. I gotta send him my measurements. He's gonna borrow some armor, and we'll do a video of like sparring or whatever if we raise that 15404.
That's amazing.
So the goal is set at 10,000, but the secret goal is 15404, so that Ulf paints the mountain who paints will beat me up in armor. For your amusement, chat gang. So July 30th, July 31st. Please tell everybody tune in. We've got a lot of swag, and it's for a great cause. And like this is you've hung out here for an hour and a half with us. You've heard Eve talking about all this, and yeah, so just good cause. They're doing great stuff, and I think that parallel between video games and the gaming industry. I know Dr. B, who will be on, is a avid tabletop gamer.
Yeah.
I know checking. He plays Warhammer Hordes. I know he's not as cool as Age of Sigmar, but we forgive him. He's doing some good work and does some D&D stuff. He's actually done a clinical study, as I understand, with like yeah. Go ahead. Can you actually speak to that
he
at all?
wrote.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he wrote Gardens of Fog, which is a one-shot adventure. Um, I will ruin it if I say too much about it, but it has a mental health theme. And it's a really lovely little, 2 to 3 hour adventure um, that dives into the, some real mental health stuff, and it tries to be accurate, but also it's a, you
It's
know,
fun. Yeah.
he is a devoted and DM. He also actually his expertise is using a role playing games in therapeutic settings with youth, which is fascinating.
Yeah, I've seen some studies. So this is really cool
Really
because
cool.
this is
Yeah.
I've seen some studies in particular with spectrum disorder or children
Yeah.
on the autistic spectrum. And one of my best friends in Age of Sigmar, he's would have formerly been called Asperger's, but that's the old
Mhm.
terminology, and he'll be the first to tell you that it was like really weird for him to kind of go his whole life knowing that this is what he had, and then he doesn't have that like term anymore, and there's
Yeah.
actually been some you know, this is the kind of stuff that we don't think about with mental health is like, when your labels change, you know,
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and
No,
now
it's a
you're
big
like,
deal.
and now you're like, well, now my
Well, what am
label's
I
different.
now?
Yeah. What am I now? And, and some of that, but, for Age of Sigmar, just Age of Sigmar, which isn't as, explicitly social as it is very much a social game, but RPGs are very explicitly social. Like the
Exactly.
game is the social, right? Whereas in AOS, social is a component of it. Because you have to communicate with your opponent. You have to. It's not Magic the Gathering, which I used to play. I can go anywhere in the world and like put the card down and like
Right.
I don't need to speak the same language, which for better or worse, by the way, that's actually one of the things that's kind of fascinating
Oh,
and great about.
totally. Totally. Yeah.
But with
Yeah.
AOS, you have that social component. And with his autism, he said that like having like a codified like
Hmm.
structure of social interaction has been one of the best things for him. And like I love Nick to death. He'll be on the Rantathon. He is a doctor of Warhammer. Not that his doctorate is in Warhammer, just like Alex here. Um, and and like it's funny because like I'm a very sarcastic kind of
Hmm.
individual, and he'll like look at me and he'll just be like, "Was that sarcasm?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Cool," and it's like because he does, but because you have this safe framework of a game to interact with people, you're able to sort of you have sort of like a center or focal point. And I saw very
Yeah.
specifically with RPGs like having really sort of like huge, great like sort of like teaching methods and like really helping, especially
Yeah.
children with autism and on the spectrum and stuff like.
Yeah, and actually, just this is a personal story. So during the pandemic, we formed a pod with two other families, right? Because we have an only child, and she was not going to survive the pandemic without
Yeah.
um, other kids. And my husband David started a D&D game for the three kids, and they were 9 when they started playing, and now they're all 11. And it was a lot of teaching them social norms and like how to take like have empathy and perspective taking, like how to play a character as opposed to
Right.
themselves.
Right.
It was so fascinating to watch that all take shape through a D&D game. It was really cool.
Yeah,
It's
no,
really
I mean that's the beauty. So I run a vampire game every Wednesday
nice.
on Twitch, and my vampire group's coming on, so that even they'll be there to help raise money for Take This, and
Great.
we're giving away some vampire books, because nothing
Nice.
says mental health like pretending you're a freaking vampire. Um,
That sounds like super fun to
it's-
me. I'm telling you.
yeah, no, like, no, it's a blast. Like, but for me, like RPGs, gaming has been my therapy. I mean,
Yeah.
I used now there's a part where that scale tips unhealthy, right? But I because
And absolutely. Yeah.
but
Hmm.
and this is what's so funny, kind of just resetting from earlier with my son, where like his therapist is like, no, if video games have become his thing for decompression, you got to let him keep that. And so like like you can set a healthy boundary, like a like a timer, like a parental control where like
Yeah.
he only gets 1 hour or whatever. But if that's what his thing is, then you got to let him keep that. And
Hmm.
for me, I'm like, how did I miss this? Because I was like I literally would run away from my home to avoid some stuff at home and go to the game store.
Yeah.
And to not confront the monsters in my house, I would go into games and fight monsters in a game where I could actually, you know,
Them.
right. And
You
and
could win.
and
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that helped me personally, turn into the awesome micro internet celebrity I am today. Like, um, with a great sense of
We
humor.
all need a place in
Right.
life. Like we have to
Yeah.
find our spot, and
Yeah.
apparently this is yours.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, games are amazing, and they can be maladaptive, absolutely. But games are really amazing in
Mhm.
the way that they give people access to worlds and perspectives. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and then there's the community aspect of like game culture,
Yeah.
which I think is it's had some rocky. There's been some rocky bits with it, and but being able to be like, hey, you like that video game, I like that video game too, like now, and then you just make a friend. As I'm a, like it's easier for me to make friends in any gaming community than it is like at work or any other social situation as an
Hmm.
adult, especially. It's like, I've got a couple friends we've made through the school because our kids hang out. And I'm like, the only way I make friends these days is like my kids hang out with them. So like, I guess we're gonna have to tolerate the parents. Might as well like have a board game night, or through like gaming.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so,
Yeah.
um,
Totally.
not everyone's fit to be the most dangerous man in Age of Sigmar. You're right, Skelebro. You're correct. Yeah, it's a tough job. Somebody's got to be the most
Somebody's
dangerous
got
man
to.
in AOS. And just so you know, Ulf, you do not get the crown if you beat me for real with physical weapons. Because I didn't say I'm the most dangerous man with weapons physically in AOS. So like I get to maintain that title. Uh, I didn't give it
Not
to
getting in the
myself.
middle of that debate. I'm gonna let you two figure
So
that one out.
yeah. Is there kind of like wrap up here? Is there anything
Hmm.
else we didn't touch on? Something, anything you wanted to get to that you has been kicking around in your head? Anything
Um,
we talked on but kind of talked over or talked past that you want to reset?
I would say no. I mean, we covered a lot. This was good.
Yeah.
We went down enough rabbit holes that we kind of circled back around, which was awesome, and I had fun doing it. So, yeah, I think the most important thing here, I'm gonna let my dog back in, is to really reaffirm that um, uh, finding and getting the help that you need is possible.
Hmm.
And having a community is one of the most important things to building your own resilience. So if you're here and you're part of this community, like you're already doing a lot to help yourself,
Hmm.
right? Um, and that's awesome. And keep doing it, and keep being open and vulnerable and honest with the people you trust in your life, and you will be okay. You will find the support you need.
Right on.
May take some time. It may take some, oh, I didn't know I had that. That's an interesting new
Yep.
revelation.
Yep. Yep.
But you'll get there.
Yeah. 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 No,
Yeah.
the having to like with the bipolar one, and this is where like my therapist did like jujitsu on me. I was thinking about switching therapists. Just kind of piggyback off that. The
Yeah.
first, if someone out there like you're already in part of the community, cool, like awesome. If you think you need therapy, it is intimidating. It is hard. But if you're already to that point, like, yeah, like you already kind of
Do
know,
it.
go if you're able to. Again, talk to your primary care physician, ask for a referral. That'll keep you in network. If you don't have insurance, a really handy there's probably even some resources on Take This resource page. One of the ones I used in my 20s when I needed some help with like sleep studies and my insomnia was through the basically I lived in a college town, so the college had their sort of undergrad or their graduates working on getting their clinical hours.
These clinics.
So it's a free service because they need their hours and you need the therapy. So like that's a really good resource if that's around. Otherwise, Take This. But that first time is going to be difficult when you go in, and the second time's harder. It's especially hard for, and this is where your intersectionality comes in. Men are half as likely to go back as women that second session. So I know my demographics, gentlemen, in chat gang. Go back the second time too. I've never felt so. I am a guy who talks too much and isn't afraid to tell you what he believes. And I have never felt more exposed than that first session in therapy.
Yeah, therapy can be really intense. I would say, don't be afraid to stick with. But also, one of the things is that the research has shown that one of the most important aspects of or predictors of success in therapy is if you have a good relationship with your therapist. And so if you find a therapist and you're like, I don't think I can trust this person, or they don't get me at all, like you show up as a gamer and they're like, games suck, or I don't know. Don't be afraid to look for a new therapist.
Many of them will even refer you to somebody else if you ask them. Yeah. And this is so like I have my like prescribing therapist, and I'm like, all right, prescribing therapist, like I don't know if it's jiving with talkie therapist. Do you know if someone? And she's like, well, you could ask her, and I'm like, okay, but she did some like jujitsu on me, like this last therapy session where like I'm like I was already thinking about changing because. And then because we weren't really, it was like basic stuff like, well, if you're stressed with the job, like just talkie, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, why haven't you told me anything about what's wrong with me yet? And, like why, I've manic depression. Like, why aren't we talking about that stuff? And then I just like, as these rabbit holes kind of go, and if you let me talk long enough, I'll say something. I started describing a hypomania phase basically. How I'd felt reckless in my relationships, how I, like going and like she heard all the indicators of mania, and she goes, and I talked about how like it all punctuated on Saturday night when I felt literally invincible, and I ended up in the first, scuffle I've been in for about 15 years, and she's like, well, that's hypomania, and she like, and the way she talked to me and navigated me through all that, I was just like, huh. You didn't talk about my manic depression for 6 sessions because the first thing I said to you was I was afraid of my mom's manic depression. So you didn't like force me to talk about it. You waited until I'm like, I see you now, chess mistress. Like I see what. So now, like I actually like she in that moment. Like I just like okay, no, like I'm like she probably is the like the therapist I need. And that was. And I told that whole story to Chat Gang to say, like, if you think you go there, give it. You got to go back, and if it's really not working, you don't trust them, especially. That's where you need to seek a referral.
Yeah.
And most of the time, they will refer you, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of tools, a lot of resources on Take This. Their resource page had me at hello, alone, plus the intersectionality work, which I'm like gaming is an island of misfit toys. Like we're all coming, it's this is where you see the most just diverse group of folks. There's like it's also a place where we can have equity and parity. I get to make up a human being in an RPG and be literally anybody, right? Like it's
amazing.
Yeah, it's that sort of stuff, and having a little bit more representation on the video game side of things that Take This is advocating for. And doing the work there. Like I couldn't be happier to throw money at an organization like mental health and making games better. Here you go. Take all my money, or rather, take all Chat Gang's money.
Oh well then.
Yeah. So we do something on RantCast. It's called the Final Soapbox. This can be random rabbit hole. If this is if there's that you can abuse my platform to say anything that's on your mind. You can, if you want to talk about how great dogs are, like whatever it is, it's supposed to be in good humor. This is your. I've talked way too much. I always talk way too much. It is now. I'm giving you my soapbox to get back at me.
Oh wow.
So the final.
Oh wow. Um, oh no, I don't know what to say. There's so many things.
Yeah.
I'm gonna avoid current events because that's just gonna ruin it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I will say, so, um, I will say that so it's spring here, and I live in the Pacific Northwest outside of Seattle, and I love to garden, and um, I'm starting to plant stuff, and we're harvesting like asparagus and kale from last year, etc. And I have to say, for mental health, for general well-being, and for like being a good person and like understanding where you sit in the world, I really, I think, I think everybody should like play in the like work in the dirt. Even if you live in an apartment in the middle of the city, like have a little
Urban
window
garden
box with
or
like
urban
some
gardens. Yeah.
herb garden,
Yeah.
or flowers. I don't care, but like put your hands in dirt and like be connected to the real stuff.
Hmm.
There's
Yeah.
something, like I love games. I play games. My whole family plays games. Um, both RPG and board and like tabletop and board games and video games, but like there is nothing that can replace getting dirty
Right.
in the dirt.
I mean, there. No, brilliant, brilliant, and a hot take, no less, too. Like the video games. Put the controller
Dirt.
down, nerd. Go play in the dirt. Like,
Yeah.
love it, love it. No,
Yep.
brilliant. I actually, we've got our Lulu, my partner. I've got to get out there and build our box. But for those
Yeah.
of you in cities, by the way, she's right. Like it's urban gardens, community gardens. Like you probably have some local group that's doing something like that. One of the pound for pound, like absolute best, like in terms of like equity and like charitability and giving back to communities and grassroots movements and stuff. Community gardens in urban centers are huge. So if you're looking for something to support besides mental health, community gardens are amazing. Amazing.
Yeah, I love your plug for food equity and like access. Yeah, urban gardens, and all kinds of that stuff, and just like, yeah, get a little planter, get a little dirt.
Yeah, brilliant, brilliant. And then and anything you need to shout out on socials, any websites you need to plug again, anything that we need to make sure people know about.
So we're Take This Org on Twitter and Facebook, Instagram. We're on LinkedIn, and we're at takethis.org online. And come find us. We have a Discord. We have a very small Discord. You can find it through our website, and it is the loveliest, sweetest, most supportive community out there. And if you want a really positive mental health environment, come join our Discord.
Right on, right on.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
take this org. All one word is the YouTube as well, which has some excellent resources. The mental health minutes. I've watched all of them a couple times now at this
Nice.
point. So.
Great.
Yeah. So,
Great.
Chat Gang, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you so much for being on. This was excellent. And Chat
And
Gang,
thanks for your
yeah.
patience with my dog.
No, 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 no. It's I love the live format. I love I guess the authenticity of it all. Like it's just I can edit down stuff that ends up on like in someone's headphones later. But when you're here, the chat's talking. That's why streaming's awesome.
It's true,
It's
actually.
this is what I love about it. This is the it's just for me like some of the best moments in video games were going over to my friend's house and just like sitting on his couch and like not even playing multiplayer games, just that like being alone together type experience. And that for me streaming kind of does that where you have that like organic like you're just hanging out. It's almost
Yeah.
a crime that I call this a podcast. Um, but Chat Gang, you are the show within the show. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Remember to drink your milk, pay your taxes, be excellent to yourselves and each other. We'll catch you next time. Good night, Eve.
Good night.